The cold expanse of space harbored not only the twinkling of distant stars, but also the silent wars that raged within its infinite canvas. Among the myriad celestial conflicts, a peculiar one unfolded on the remote planet of Zerthion, where the atmosphere crackled with the tension of impending battle. General Krasthor, a formidable leader of the Varloxian fleet, towered over the assembly of his alien soldiers. His skin shimmered with a metallic hue, reflecting the faint light of Zerthion's twin suns. His eyes, deep pools of mercury, surveyed his warriors with undisguised contempt for any sign of weakness. "Today we solidify our grip on this sector," Krasthor's voice boomed through the ranks, his tone as harsh and unforgiving as the barren landscapes that stretched beyond their encampment. As he paced before his troops, his gaze fell upon a new recruit standing awkwardly among the seasoned fighters. The recruit was shorter, with a less imposing build, and lacked the typical Varloxian armored exoskeleton. Instead, it wore a simple combat suit, seemingly fragile against the backdrop of hardened warriors. Krasthor stopped in front of the odd soldier, his expression twisting into a sneer. "And what might you be?" he growled, his voice dripping with derision. The young soldier stiffened, meeting Krasthor's gaze. "I'm Cadet Elliot, sir, of the Human Resistance," he replied, his voice steady but unmistakably different in its tone and cadence, a softness that betrayed his human origin. A murmur rippled through the ranks. Human? It was almost a legend in the outer sectors, a tale of a distant, stubborn species from a blue planet, rarely encountered and often underestimated. Krasthor laughed, a sound that echoed ominously across the field. "A human? You bring me a fragile, soft-skinned human to fight the battles of giants?" His contempt seemed to amuse him as he turned to address his troops. "Behold the weakling that dares stand amongst the mighty." Elliot's face remained impassive, his eyes fixed on the general. Despite his calm exterior, his mind raced. Trained in the guerrilla tactics of Earth's most challenging terrains, he knew his strength lay not in his appearance, but in his resilience and strategic intellect. Krasthor's amusement faded as he returned his attention to Elliot. "You will be the front scout in today's assault. If you survive, perhaps then you will earn a place among us." The general's challenge was clear, a test of mettle designed to humiliate or cull the weak. As Elliot saluted and turned to prepare, Krasthor whispered to his second-in-command, "Keep an eye on that one. Either he will be a swift casualty, or he will surprise us all." With the planet's rugged terrain stretching before him, Elliot adjusted his gear, checking the human-made technology integrated seamlessly into his suit. He knew the odds were against him, but determination set his jaw firm. He wasn't just fighting for survival or to prove his worth. He was fighting for humanity's place among the stars. As he stepped out into the eerie silence of Zerthion's battlefield, the weight of his solitude pressed against him. Yet his resolve was as solid as the ground beneath his boots. He was ready to face whatever lay ahead, to challenge the galaxy's perceptions of human weakness. Unknown to Krasthor, this encounter was not merely a test of a soldier's endurance, but a pivotal moment that would challenge the prejudices of an empire and unveil the true mettle of a seemingly weak soldier. Elliot was no ordinary human, and he was about to demonstrate that courage and strategy often triumph over sheer strength and size. Elliot navigated the rugged alien landscape of Zerthion with cautious steps. His human senses were keenly attuned to the unfamiliar environment, alert to the slightest whisper of danger. The terrain was a treacherous mix of jagged rocks and steep ravines, hidden under a perpetual twilight cast by the planet's twin suns hovering on the horizon. Behind him, the Varloxian troops watched with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Their derisive laughter had faded, replaced by a tense silence as they observed the human moving deftly across the battlefield. Elliot's compact frame allowed him to maneuver through narrow gaps and climb steep ledges with an agility that his larger, bulkier counterparts could not match. General Krasthor, from his command post, monitored the young soldier's progress through enhanced visual feeds. His initial amusement was giving way to intrigue. "Monitor his vital signs and energy expenditure," he commanded his subordinates. The data streamed in, displaying Elliot's physiological responses, which remained remarkably stable despite the exertion. Ahead, Elliot reached a vantage point, a cliff that overlooked a strategic pass. Below, an enemy encampment bustled, unaware of the imminent danger. Using a compact binocular device, he scanned the area, recording enemy positions and fortifications. His mission was to gather intelligence, but the young cadet decided to push further. He descended the cliff using a series of handholds that would have been invisible to the less observant eye. Reaching the bottom, Elliot crept closer to the encampment. His suit, treated with a reflective coating, blended with the rocks and shadows, making him nearly invisible in the low light. As he moved, a sudden shift in the wind carried the sound of his movements to a sentry. The alien soldier, a hulking creature with sensor antennae twitching, turned towards Elliot. Time seemed to slow as Elliot considered his options. With a swift decision, he drew a small, silenced pistol and fired. The sentry collapsed, a quiet thud on the soft ground. The silence held. Elliot quickly dragged the body into the shadows, masking his tracks as he continued his reconnaissance. Each piece of information gathered was silently transmitted back to his superiors, painting a detailed picture of the enemy's capabilities and plans. As the suns began to set, casting long shadows over the landscape, Elliot made his way back to the Varloxian lines. He had remained undetected, his mission a success. However, the true test was yet to come, as he would have to face General Krasthor and the doubt of his alien allies. Upon his return, the Varloxian troops greeted him with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Even Krasthor could not hide his grudging respect as he reviewed the data Elliot had gathered. "Impressive," he muttered, almost against his will. "The human has proven useful." Elliot stood before the general, fatigue masked by the steady poise of his stance. "I have completed the reconnaissance, General. The enemy is unaware of our knowledge." Krasthor nodded, his eyes narrowing. "You have shown skill, human, but the war is not won with skill alone." His tone was reluctant but accepting. "Prepare for the assault. This time you will not go alone." As the Varloxian warriors rallied for the upcoming battle, inspired in part by the bravery and cunning of a single human, Elliot prepared his gear. He knew the real challenge lay ahead, not in proving his individual worth, but in demonstrating that humanity could stand shoulder to shoulder with the galaxy's fiercest warriors. The battlefield would soon become a crucible, testing the bonds of unlikely alliances and the strength of interstellar resolve. As the twin suns of Zerthion dipped below the horizon, casting an eerie twilight over the battlefield, the Varloxian forces, bolstered by the intelligence gathered by Elliot, advanced towards the enemy encampment. The air vibrated with the hum of energy weapons and the distant thuds of heavy artillery. Elliot, now integrated within a squad of Varloxian commandos, adjusted the settings on his rifle, a modified version designed to accommodate his human physiology. His squad mates, giant figures clad in thick armor, moved with surprising stealth for their size. "Stay close, human," grunted Tarkhan, the squad leader, a towering figure whose respect for Elliot had grown after the reconnaissance mission. "Your insights are invaluable, but remember, you're not as tough as you are clever." Elliot nodded, understanding the balance he had to maintain between proving his worth and staying alive. As they neared the encampment, the squad split into smaller units, each tasked with disabling the enemy's defensive capabilities. Elliot and a small team of 3 Varloxians moved towards the northern perimeter where the enemy's communication arrays were located. The plan was simple: disable the communications, isolate the encampment, and allow the main Varloxian force to engage with minimal enemy coordination. Using a compact device, Elliot disrupted the electronic signals, temporarily creating a blind spot in the enemy's surveillance. They slipped through the perimeter, neutralizing guards with precise, silent strikes. The human's smaller stature and agility provided an unexpected advantage in the confined spaces between the guard posts. As they reached the communication hub, a tense moment unfolded. The team encountered a security protocol that was unfamiliar, a new technology perhaps developed in anticipation of such an assault. Elliot's heart raced as he interfaced his device with the alien technology. His fingers moved with practiced ease, but the alien encryption was complex, a web of interlocking algorithms that challenged even his skilled hacking abilities. "Time span, human," Tarkon whispered, his voice tense. Minutes, maybe less, Elliot replied, his focus unbroken. He rerouted data streams, bypassed security layers, and finally cracked the encryption. The communication arrays went dark, casting the encampment into a sudden, forced silence. Done, Elliot breathed out, a sigh of relief masked by the soft whir of his device powering down. The team quickly set explosive charges, planning to leave nothing but rubble. As they exfiltrated, the main Varloxian force commenced their assault, the night erupting into a cacophony of blasts and energy fire. Elliot's team regrouped with the others, watching as their plan unfolded with lethal precision. In the chaos, Elliot's mind was clear, his role as bridge between human ingenuity and Varloxian strength never more crucial. The battle raged, and despite the violence, there was a kind of beauty in the synchronicity of their attack, a testament to the power of unity across species. With the communications down, the enemy was slow to organize a counterattack, their commands disjointed and ineffective. The Varloxians capitalized on the confusion, pushing forward with relentless aggression. As dawn broke over Zerthion, the enemy encampment was in ruins, a testament to the devastating effectiveness of the operation. The Varloxians celebrated their victory, but for Elliot, the fight was more than just a military success. It was proof that humanity had much to offer, even in a galaxy teeming with advanced species. His thoughts, however, were abruptly cut short as a new order came through. The battle for Zerthion was just beginning, and the next phase would bring even greater challenges. Tarkon clapped him on the back, a gesture of camaraderie born of battle. Come, human, our next move awaits. Elliot nodded, stepping into the light of a new day, ready to face whatever came next with the knowledge that his journey was not just about survival, but about changing the very fabric of interstellar relations. As the Varloxian force regrouped and strategized for the next phase of their campaign, Elliot found himself deep in the makeshift command center, surrounded by maps and holographic displays of the planet. The air was thick with the electric scent of ozone and victory, yet the weight of upcoming decisions hung heavily over the assembled leaders. General Krasthor, his presence dominating the room, pointed at a series of blips on the hologram. The enemy's main force is located here. He indicated a fortified position in a valley surrounded by steep mountains, a natural stronghold. But we have a secret weapon. He glanced at Elliot with a mixture of respect and expectation. Elliot stepped forward, the datapads in his hands flickering with incoming reports and satellite imagery. The terrain is to our advantage, he began, his voice calm but assertive. These mountains are riddled with subterranean passages, remnants of ancient volcanic activity. We can use these tunnels to infiltrate their stronghold undetected. The room fell silent as the warriors considered this. The Varloxians were not accustomed to subterfuge or the art of stealth. Their battles were usually frontal, a testament to their brute strength and formidable technology. Tarkon, now acting as Elliot's unofficial second, nodded slowly. It's risky. Our troops are not trained for such subtlety. Elliot met his gaze. That's why I propose a combined task force. Varloxians will lead the assault as a diversion. Meanwhile, a select team, including myself, will penetrate the stronghold via the tunnels, disabling their defenses from within. Krasthor's eyes narrowed, considering the human's plan. And if you fail, we will be exposed, vulnerable to a counterattack. True, but the element of surprise will be in our favor. The enemy will not expect an attack from beneath their feet. It's our best shot at ending this quickly and decisively. After a tense pause, Krasthor gave a curt nod. Prepare your team, Cadet Elliot. We strike at dawn. The night was spent in feverish preparation. Elliot, along with a hand-picked team of Varloxian specialists and a few other human volunteers, equipped themselves with the necessary gear. Each member was versed in the details of the plan, understanding their role in the upcoming operation. Elliot felt the familiar thrill of anticipation mixed with the icy touch of fear. He reviewed the maps one last time, memorizing every twist and turn of the underground labyrinth. The stakes were higher than ever, not just for him but for the fragile alliance that had formed between humans and Varloxians. Dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky with strokes of orange and pink. The assault began with a barrage of heavy artillery, shaking the ground as the Varloxians made their presence violently known. Meanwhile, Elliot's team moved silently towards the mountain base, their movements hidden by the dim light of dawn. Entering the tunnels was like stepping into another world. The air was cool and damp, the silence a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding outside. Guided by Elliot's steady hand, the team navigated through the darkness, moving towards the heart of the enemy stronghold. Progress was slow. The risk of detection loomed with every step. As they reached the final stretch, a sudden burst of alien language crackled over a discarded communicator. One of the enemy soldiers had become suspicious. Elliot signaled a halt, listening intently. The message was clear. They were on high alert, but unaware of the imminent threat from below. Elliot motioned for the team to prepare for what might be a violent emergence into the enemy base. The final breach was explosive, both literally and figuratively. Charges set at strategic points blew open the stronghold's underbelly, and Elliot's team surged through the openings. What followed was a blur of gunfire, shouted commands, and the fierce cry of battle. Amidst the chaos, Elliot found his way to the control room. His fingers flew over alien consoles, executing the sequences that would disable the stronghold's defenses. Above, the sound of the Varloxian assault grew louder, a sign that the diversion was still holding. With a final keystroke, the stronghold's shields faltered, leaving it vulnerable. Elliot allowed himself a brief smile of triumph, even as he turned to rejoin the fight, knowing that the battle was far from over, but their victory was now within reach. The stronghold's defenses were down, and the signal to advance was clear. Above ground, the Varloxians intensified their assault, their war cries mingling with the sounds of destructive energy blasts. The once impregnable fortress now stood exposed, its shields flickering out like the last gasps of a dying star. In the control room, Elliot wiped the sweat from his brow, his eyes scanning the monitors that displayed the chaos unfolding at various points of the stronghold. His team, efficient and deadly, had secured the critical zones, cutting off enemy reinforcements and sowing confusion among the ranks. As Elliot prepared to move out, a sudden tremor shook the foundation of the stronghold, a direct hit from Varloxian heavy artillery. The enemy, now realizing the true extent of their peril, began to retaliate with desperate ferocity. Elliot could hear the intensified exchanges of fire, the shouts growing closer. "Form up! We need to hold this position until the main force breaks through," he shouted to his team, who quickly barricaded the entry points with debris and disabled equipment. They took defensive positions, their weapons trained on the doors and corridors leading to their makeshift stronghold within the stronghold. Outside, General Krasthor, observing the effectiveness of the humans' plan, pushed his troops harder. "Advance! Elliot has done his part. Let us crush what remains of their will." The Varloxian soldiers, inspired by the success of the covert operation, surged forward with renewed vigor, their armor reflecting the fiery glow of explosions and energy discharges. Back in the control room, Elliot monitored the approach of Allied forces on his handheld device, calculating the time they needed to hold out. His team exchanged fire with enemy squads attempting to reclaim the control center. Each Varloxian and human fought with a blend of discipline and desperation, knowing that the balance of the battle hinged on their ability to maintain control of the nerve center. An explosion near the main entrance sent a cloud of dust and debris into the air, momentarily obscuring vision, but not the resolve of Elliot and his team. Through the haze, figures emerged, Varloxian reinforcements breaking through to support the beleaguered team. "Tarkon!" Elliot called out as the squad leader emerged at the forefront of the reinforcements, his armor scorched but intact. "Elliot, the path is clear, but we must move quickly to capitalize on the advantage," Tarkon responded, stepping over debris to clap Elliot on the shoulder. Together they coordinated the next moves, dispatching teams to secure the perimeter and hunt down the remaining pockets of resistance. As the stronghold's internal security systems were disabled one by one, the enemy's command structure collapsed, leading to a swift decrease in organized defense. The Varloxians and humans pressed on, clearing the stronghold room by room, corridor by corridor. In the final hours of the battle, the stronghold's command room was breached. Inside, the enemy leaders were captured, their defeat marked by the lowering of their flags and the raising of the Varloxian banners. The stronghold, a symbol of enemy power, had fallen, and with it their control over the region. As the dust settled and the sounds of battle faded, Elliot stood alongside General Krasthor, overlooking the captured stronghold. The general's expression was one of grudging admiration. "Your strategies have proven effective, Cadet Elliot. You have fought not just with courage but with intellect." Elliot nodded, his thoughts on the cost of their victory and the future. "It was a collective effort, General. This victory belongs to all of us, Varloxians and humans alike." The alliance, forged in the fires of battle, had not only held, but had strengthened. As they prepared to move to the next phase of the campaign, Elliot knew that the war was far from over. Yet the success of their unlikely collaboration offered a glimpse of hope, a potential blueprint for a future where mutual respect could perhaps replace mutual suspicion in the galactic arena. After the fall of the stronghold, the landscape of Zerthion's conflict shifted. The once aggressive maneuvers of the enemy had turned into retreats and skirmishes as they struggled to regroup and reassess their crumbling positions. For the Varloxians and their human allies, this was a time to solidify gains and prepare for the inevitable counterattacks. Elliot spent the following days immersed in debriefings and planning sessions. His insights into human guerrilla tactics and adaptive warfare had earned him a permanent spot at the strategic table, alongside General Krasthor and his senior commanders. The integration of human strategies with Varloxian military might was beginning to reshape the campaign's dynamics. In the dimly lit war room, a new plan took shape. "We need to press our advantage," Krasthor stated, his finger tracing the lines of advance on the holographic map. "But we must also be wary of overextending. The enemy is down but not out." Elliot nodded, his eyes scanning the terrain features displayed. "The northern ridge offers a natural defensive line. If we can fortify it, we can control the sector and cut off their main supply routes." "Agreed," Tarkhan chimed in, his deep voice resonant in the close quarters. "But the area is rife with ambush points. We should send scouting parties first." Elliot volunteered for the task, keen to keep the momentum of their collaboration going. With a small unit composed of both Varloxians and humans, he set out towards the northern ridge. The landscape was harsh, the ground uneven and strewn with the remnants of previous battles, burned-out vehicles, discarded weapons, and the eerie, silent witnesses of fallen soldiers. As they approached the ridge, the quiet was unsettling. Elliot's team moved with caution, their sensors and scanners sweeping the area. Suddenly, a faint signal beeped on Elliot's device, an anomaly that suggested hidden electronic activity. "Stop," Elliot commanded softly, raising his hand. He crouched, examining the device readings. "There's something ahead, not natural, possibly mines or a trap." Using a drone, they scouted ahead remotely. The drone's camera feed showed a series of cleverly hidden mines rigged to create a lethal barrier. Elliot's team carefully disarmed the traps, a task that required precision and patience. Once the path was cleared, they secured the ridge, setting up surveillance equipment and defensive emplacements. The view from the ridge was strategic, overlooking the valley that served as a critical juncture for enemy movements. That night, under a blanket of stars, Elliot and his team watched as shadows moved in the distance. An enemy unit was attempting to navigate the valley, unaware of the new eyes watching them. With quiet efficiency, Elliot coordinated an interception. The skirmish that followed was brief and decisive, further demoralizing the enemy and providing critical intelligence on their movements. In the aftermath of the skirmish, while inspecting the captured equipment and prisoners, Elliot found a device with encrypted data. It hinted at larger enemy formations regrouping further east, potentially preparing for a major counteroffensive. With this new intelligence, Elliot hurried back to the command center. The data decrypted en route revealed a detailed plan for a massive strike aimed at reclaiming lost territories. The enemy's desperation was evident in their ambitious scope and the risky nature of their planned offensive. Presenting the findings to General Krasthor, Elliot watched as the older warrior absorbed the implications. They will strike soon and hard. We need to prepare our defenses and plan a counter-strategy that could end this conflict for good. Plans were rapidly drawn up for what would be known as the Battle of the Eastern Front. Elliot's role was crucial, blending human cunning and Varloxian strength into a unified strategy that aimed to turn the enemy's desperation into their ultimate defeat. As preparations for the battle forged ahead, Elliot felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The upcoming confrontation would be a testament to their unity and strategic acumen, with the potential to shape the future of not just Zerthion, but of interstellar relations between humans and Varloxians. The Varloxian forces, now bolstered by human tactics and technology, positioned themselves strategically along the Eastern Front. The landscape was a stark tableau of jagged rock formations and steep gullies, providing natural fortifications but also posing significant challenges for both attackers and defenders. Elliot, stationed at a forward command post, reviewed the deployment of troops and equipment. His console was lit with the indicators of troop positions, sensor sweeps, and communication links. The air was tense with anticipation, every soldier aware that the coming battle could well decide the fate of the campaign. General Krasthor stood beside him, watching the horizon. "The enemy will not wait long. They're desperate and they know time is against them," he remarked, his voice low. Elliot nodded, his fingers dancing over the console, adjusting the sensor arrays to maximize their coverage. "We've laid out the bait. They'll think they're exploiting a weakness in our lines. When they commit, we'll encircle them from both flanks." Krasthor grunted his approval. The strategy was risky, requiring precise timing and coordination, traits not traditionally associated with Varloxian warfare, but which had been honed over recent battles through Elliot's influence. As dawn broke, the silence was shattered by the roar of enemy artillery. The battle began with ferocious intensity, as the enemy launched a full-scale assault on the center of the Varloxian lines, just as anticipated. Elliot's role shifted rapidly from planner to field commander. He relayed orders, ensuring that the reserve units remained hidden until the critical moment. The Varloxian troops, disciplined under fire, slowly retreated, drawing the enemy deeper into the trap. From his vantage point, Elliot could see the battle unfold. The enemy, buoyed by their initial success, surged forward, unaware of the encroaching danger. It wasn't long before the Varloxians sprung the trap. The flanks moved silently, using the rugged terrain to conceal their approach. With a series of coordinated strikes, the Varloxians hit the enemy from both sides. Confusion spread through the enemy ranks like wildfire. The Varloxian central line, bolstered by reinforcements, halted its retreat and pushed back with renewed vigor. Elliot watched as the tide of battle turned. His console beeped with updates and reports, each confirming that their strategy was playing out as planned. He allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction before his attention was drawn to a new development. A section of the eastern flank reported heavier resistance than expected. The enemy had managed to bring in elite units, previously undetected by their intelligence. Elliot quickly reassessed the situation, his mind racing through possibilities. "Shift aerial surveillance to Sector 7. Redirect the 3rd Battalion to support the eastern flank," he commanded, his voice calm but urgent. The adjustments were swiftly enacted, and the battle's momentum maintained. Throughout the day, the fighting raged. Elliot found himself in the thick of it, not just as a commander, but also on the ground, where he led a critical charge to reclaim a strategic point. His leadership in the field, under direct fire, solidified his standing among both human and Varloxian troops. As the sun set, the battlefield bore the scars of the day's fierce encounters. The enemy had been decisively beaten back, their plans shattered against the combined might and strategy of the Allied forces. In the command post, General Krasthor approached Elliot, his face grim yet relieved. "Today we've not just won a battle. We've likely turned the course of this war. Your strategies have saved many lives." Elliot nodded, his gaze lingering on the battlefield. "It's a victory for now, but the war isn't over yet. We need to be vigilant and ready for what comes next." Together they turned to oversee the recovery and fortification efforts. The Eastern Front had held, But the war for Zerthion was far from over. The night would be short as plans were drawn and preparations made for the days to come. In the aftermath of the battle at the Eastern Front, the Allied forces took advantage of the enemy's disarray to reinforce their positions and extend their control over key territories. However, the victory, while significant, brought new challenges to the forefront, particularly in terms of logistics and interspecies relations. The encampment buzzed with activity as troops and engineers worked tirelessly to repair damaged equipment and fortify positions. Amidst the hustle, Elliot found himself more involved in diplomatic tasks than military strategy. The success of their joint operations had heightened the need for deeper cooperation between human and Varloxian command structures. One evening, as the twin moons of Zerthion cast a pale light over the camp, a tense meeting took place in General Krasthor's command tent. Representatives from the human contingent, including Elliot, gathered with their Varloxian counterparts to discuss the distribution of resources and future operational planning. "The humans request more access to Varloxian shield technology," one of the human diplomats stated, his tone carefully neutral yet firm. "We believe this will enhance our defensive capabilities and contribute more effectively to joint operations." General Krasthor's response was measured, his deep voice resonating in the confined space. "Our technology is sacred to our people. Sharing it freely risks diluting its significance." Elliot, sensing the growing tension, intervened. "Perhaps we could establish a training program instead. Human engineers could learn from Varloxian experts to better understand the technology, under supervision, without compromising its integrity." The suggestion seemed to ease the atmosphere slightly. Discussions continued, with Elliot often playing the role of mediator, bridging cultural and technological gaps with diplomacy and tact. As the meeting drew to a close, the parties reached a tentative agreement on several points, including joint training sessions and shared patrols. However, the undercurrents of distrust and cultural differences remained, reminding Elliot that the alliance was still fragile. The following days saw Elliot more on the move, visiting various outposts and participating in the joint training sessions he had proposed. His presence and direct involvement slowly began to build trust between the two species. During one such session, a crisis erupted when a Varloxian patrol was ambushed by a rogue enemy faction. The patrol, comprising both human and Varloxian troops, suffered heavy casualties. Elliot was among the first to respond, leading a rescue team into the fray. The skirmish was brutal but brief. Elliot's team managed to extract the survivors and fend off the attackers, but the incident left several wounded and shook the morale of the troops. Back at the camp, as the medics tended to the injured, Elliot and Tarkhan reviewed the attack. "This was no random strike," Tarkhan noted, examining the data pads showing enemy movements. "They knew exactly where to hit us. We might have a security breach or a leak." Elliot nodded in agreement. "We need to tighten our intel protocols, maybe introduce more rigorous checks and balances." "That's your field, human. Lead the review, implement what you need," Tarkhan replied, placing his trust in Elliot's judgment. Over the next few days, Elliot worked closely with Varloxian security teams to overhaul their communication and intelligence operations. New encryption methods were introduced, and data access was restricted to a need-to-know basis. These measures, while necessary, slowed down operations and added a layer of complexity to the already strained logistics. However, the tightening of security proved effective. The frequency of ambushes dropped, and the morale among the troops gradually improved. Through these trials, the alliance, though tested by fire and suspicion, began to solidify. Elliot's role as a leader and liaison became more crucial than ever as he navigated the delicate balance of power and partnership that would determine the future of their united front on Zerthion. As the weeks turned into months on Zerthion, the Allied forces, under the combined leadership of General Krasthor and Elliot, continued to press their advantage against the scattered enemy factions. The tightened security measures and the deepening cooperation between human and Varloxian troops had turned the tide decisively in their favor. Elliot found himself increasingly in the role of a strategist, his expertise not only in tactical operations, but also in fostering unity among diverse groups, proving invaluable. The battles, though still fierce, were becoming more sporadic as the enemy's ability to mount coordinated offensives waned. One crisp morning, with the twin suns of Zerthion casting long shadows across the rugged terrain, Elliot and General Krasthor surveyed the map of the region. The last known strongholds of the enemy were marked in red, isolated and surrounded by areas under Allied control. "It is time to end this," Krasthor declared, his voice resonant with the weight of the long campaign. "We will launch a final series of strikes, simultaneous and overwhelming, to crush what remains of their resistance." Elliot nodded, his eyes scanning the strategic points. "We should also prepare for post-conflict stability operations. Winning the peace is just as important as winning the war." "Indeed," Krasthor agreed. "You have taught us much about the art of war, human. But it seems there is more we can learn from you about peace." Plans were drawn up quickly, with Elliot coordinating the final operations. The assaults were meticulously planned to minimize further loss of life and hasten the end of the conflict. Varloxian and human forces worked seamlessly, their previous mistrust replaced by a hardened camaraderie. The final battles were intense but brief. The enemy, demoralized and poorly coordinated, could not withstand the might and precision of the Allied assault. Within days, the last pockets of resistance were cleared, and the commanders of the enemy were brought in for negotiations. The peace talks took place in a tent set up in the heart of the former conflict zone, symbolizing the transition from war to peace. Elliot, alongside General Krasthor and other senior leaders, faced their former adversaries across a simple table. The negotiations were tough but fair. Elliot's diplomatic skills shone as he helped bridge the gap between the bitter enemies, drawing up terms that ensured disarmament, reintegration, and reconstruction. The treaty laid the groundwork for a lasting peace, one that promised to respect the sovereignty and dignity of all parties. As the treaty was signed, Elliot felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. The long months of conflict had taken their toll on everyone, and the prospect of peace was a balm to the weary soldiers. In the days that followed, as the Allied troops began to demobilize and plans for reconstruction took shape, Elliot had a chance to reflect on the long journey. The Varloxians, once so alien in their ways and thoughts, had become comrades, and humanity, a minor species in the galactic community, had proven its mettle and earned respect. At a small ceremony marking the end of the conflict, General Krasthor formally thanked Elliot. "Your courage and wisdom have not just won a war, they have helped forge a path to peace. We are in your debt, Elliot of Earth." Elliot shook Krasthor's hand, feeling the strength of the Varloxian grip. "It was an honor to serve alongside such brave warriors. Let's hope this peace is the legacy we leave for future generations." As the sun set on Zerthion, casting the landscape in hues of gold and purple, Elliot looked out over the fields once marred by war, now quiet and still. Peace would require effort and vigilance, but for the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful about the future. The war was over, and the real work could begin. The dawn of peace on Zerthion was marked not by grand ceremonies or triumphant parades, but by quiet acts of rebuilding and reconciliation. The landscape, scarred by months of relentless conflict, began to show signs of healing as both Varloxian and human engineers worked side by side to restore what had been lost. In the capital, a monument was being erected, not just to commemorate the victory, but to honor the fallen and celebrate the newfound partnership between the two species. Elliot, having become a symbol of this alliance, was deeply involved in the planning and execution of this symbol of unity. As the final day of his deployment approached, Elliot walked through the camps where soldiers were preparing to return to their homes. The air was filled with a mix of anticipation and solemnity, as many were eager to return to their loved ones, while others pondered the friends they'd lost. General Krasthor joined Elliot on his walk. The old warrior looked out over the troops with a mixed expression of pride and relief. "You have done more than lead us to victory, Elliot," he said, his voice carrying a rare gentleness. "You have shown us the power of unity and the strength of diversity." Elliot nodded, his thoughts turning to the countless decisions, the pressures, and the strategies that had defined his days. "I hope the peace will last, General. We've laid a strong foundation, but it will be up to those who follow to build upon it." "That is the nature of peace," Krasthor agreed. "It is not an end but a beginning, a fragile state that must be nurtured and protected." The monument's unveiling was to be Elliot's last official act on Zerthion. As the cloth was pulled away, revealing a sculpture of intertwined metallic and organic forms representing Varloxians and humans, the crowd gathered around applauded. The artwork captured the essence of their struggle and the beauty of their cooperation. Speeches were made by leaders of both species, each echoing the themes of sacrifice and hope. When it came time for Elliot to speak, he chose his words carefully, mindful of the weight they carried. "Today we stand not as victors of a war, but as architects of peace," Elliot began, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, which included not only soldiers but many civilians who had come to witness this historic moment. "This monument behind me stands as a reminder of what we have achieved together, a bond forged in the fires of adversity, but stronger for it." The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence for the fallen, after which the crowd slowly dispersed, leaving Elliot and Krasthor alone by the monument. "It is time for you to return home, Elliot," Krasthor said, extending his hand. "You leave behind a legacy of courage and a beacon of cooperation." Elliot shook his hand, feeling the firmness of the grip and the sincerity of the sentiment. "Thank you, General. My time here has changed me. I hope it has helped change others, too." As Elliot boarded the ship that would take him back to Earth, he took one last look at Zerthion's rugged landscape, now peaceful under the twin suns. The journey back would be long, but he carried with him the profound lessons of war and the hopeful promises of peace. Back on Earth, as he stepped off the ship, the familiar sights and sounds of his home planet welcomed him. While he had missed these earthly comforts, he knew part of him would always remain among the stars, tied to the planet and the people who had taught him the true value of unity and resilience. The war on Zerthion was over, but the story of its peace was just beginning. As Elliot reunited with his family, his heart was full, not just with the joy of homecoming, but with the knowledge that across the vast expanse of space, a new chapter of coexistence was being written, thanks to the enduring spirit of those willing to fight not just for victory, but for harmony.